The crystal chandeliers of the Riverside Grand Hotel shimmered like falling stars, casting golden light across a banquet hall filled with the city's most powerful people. Rows of tables gleamed under polished silverware, and glasses clinked softly as servers floated gracefully between the guests. The scent of roasted duck, truffle oil, and vintage wine filled the air. It wasn't just a dinner. It was the dinner, an exclusive invitation-only gala where CEOs, politicians, and socialites came to see and be seen. Deals worth millions had been sealed over these tables. Reputations had been made and broken under the sparkle of those chandeliers. But tonight, there was a particular guest who commanded everyone's attention. Frau Helga Reinhardt, a German millionaire, renowned across Europe for her steel-like negotiation skills and ruthless investments. She sat at the center table, wrapped in a tailored emerald green gown that matched the sharpness of her eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried authority. But there was one problem. She spoke almost entirely in German. At first, the host smiled politely, nodding along as Helga spoke. But the truth was obvious. Nobody understood her. Was sagged see? Whispered one politician to another. I think. Something about trade. The other guessed nervously. The room grew tense. The host, Mr. Williams, cleared his throat. Frau Reinhardt, perhaps English, but Helga continued firmly in German, her tone sharper now, as if testing them. She knew they didn't understand. To her, it was a measure of respect. If they wanted to work with her, they should understand her language. Awkward silence thickened round the table. Executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some tried to smile. Others tapped nervously at their wine glasses. It was an international embarrassment waiting to happen. Against the walls, waitresses in black and white uniforms moved quietly, refilling glasses and replacing plates. Among them was Clara Evans, a 22-year-old who had been working double shifts to pay rent on her tiny apartment. Clara was used to being invisible. Guests barely looked at her as she served them. To them, she was just another waitress. But tonight, as Helga's words filled the room, Clara froze, because she understood every word. For years, Clara had harbored a secret passion: languages. She had grown up listening to her grandmother's German lullabies, had borrowed grammar books from the library, and had spent countless nights whispering vocabulary under her breath while scrubbing dishes. She spoke German fluently, but nobody knew. Not her boss, not her colleagues, not even her closest friends. To them, she was just Clara the waitress. But as she listened to Helga grow sharper, almost insulted at the lack of response, Clara's heart pounded. They don't understand her. She's saying they've disrespected her time. She's ready to leave. If someone doesn't step in, this dinner is ruined. Clara's hands shook as she held a wine bottle. Don't do it, she told herself. Stay quiet. This isn't your place. If you speak, they'll laugh, maybe even fire you. But then she glanced at Helga. The German woman's face had hardened. Her chair scraped against the floor as she began to rise. Clara knew what that meant. Helga was about to walk out. Without thinking, Clara set the bottle down, straightened her back, and spoke. Frau Reinhardt, she said in perfect German, her voice clear and respectful. Bit bleiben Sie. Sie sind willkommen hier. Please stay. You are welcome here. The entire room froze. Forks clattered against plates. Dozens of heads whipped toward the young waitress who had just spoken in flawless German. Helga stopped mid-step, her sharp eyes narrowing. Slowly, she turned to Clara. Sie sprechen Deutsch? She demanded. You speak German. Clara's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin. Ja, fluent. Yes, fluently. Gasps rippled around the table. Executives exchanged bewildered looks. Mr. Williams nearly choked on his wine. The invisible waitress had just become the most important person in the room. Helga tilted her head. Intrigued. Dan sagen Sie mir, was habe ich gerade gesagt? Asterisk, then tell me. What did I just say? Clara swallowed, then repeated word for word. Sie sagten, das dies in Respektlosigkeit ist. Ihr seid so zu verschwenden, an das Sie gehen würden. When niemand Sie versteht, you said that it is disrespectful to waste your time like this, and that you would leave if no one understood you. Helga's lips curved into the faintest smile. Sehr gut. Very good. She gestured toward Clara. Then you will translate. The CEO stared at the head of the table. Jonathan Williams, the host CEO, stared at Clara like she was a ghost. His empire's reputation was on the line tonight. And the girl who had just saved it wasn't one of his executives, but a waitress, Clara. He said slowly, if you know what you're doing, save this dinner. The weight of every eye in the room fell on her. Clara's pulse thundered, but she nodded, stepped closer to the table, and began in a room full of power. No one understood the millionaire German woman until a poor waitress spoke up, with flawless German that silenced them all. What Clara didn't know was that this single act of courage would change her life forever and reveal a truth that none of them could have imagined. The tension in the hall had shifted. Where moments ago silence and embarrassment reigned, now eyes followed Clara like spotlights. She stood behind Frau Reinhardt, translating sentence after sentence with precision and poise. The guests who had once ignored her now hung on her every word. Contracts, investments, cultural nuances. Clara carried each one across the bridge of translation. Her voice steady and confident. By the end of the dinner, Helga Reinhardt leaned back in her chair, visibly impressed. She clapped her hands once, commanding attention. I came here tonight doubting the seriousness of this gathering, she declared in German. Clara translated smoothly. But thanks to this young woman, I see respect. She has saved your dignity. The room erupted in applause. Clara blushed furiously, bowing her head. But not everyone was clapping with joy. In the shadows of the banquet hall, Jonathan Williams's executives exchanged dark looks. Did you see that? One muttered, a waitress, upstaging all of us. Another hissed, she made us look incompetent. A third snapped. They had spent years building reputations as advisors, strategists, and negotiators. Yet tonight, a girl in a cheap uniform had stolen their thunder in 10 minutes. Jealousy simmered beneath their polished smiles. Asterisk when the dinner ended. Jonathan approached Clara. His voice carried both authority and disbelief. You saved us tonight, he admitted. Without you, Frau Reinhardt would have walked out. That would have cost this company millions. Clara shifted nervously. I only did what anyone would have done. Jonathan arched an eyebrow. Don't be modest. Nobody else in that room could have done it. Before Clara could reply, Frau Reinhardt herself stepped forward. She clasped Clara's hands warmly. Du bist augenblicklich, she said. You are extraordinary. Clara's heart swelled. To be seen, truly seen, by someone of Helga's stature. It felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. But when the applause faded and the chandeliers dimmed, Clara returned to her reality. She walked home through the freezing night. Her thin coat pulled tight, boots soaking through the snow. Her apartment was a crumbling one-room flat above a noisy laundromat. The heater rattled like it might explode, and the electricity bill was taped to the door with final notice stamped across it. Inside, Clara's mother coughed weakly on the worn sofa. Years of factory work had ruined her lungs. You're late, sweetheart, she rasped. Clara smiled softly, hiding her exhaustion. Work ran long, Mama, but it went well. On the small table lay Clara's notebooks, pages filled with German vocabulary, French idioms, even scraps of Mandarin characters. Languages were her secret refuge, her escape from poverty. While others partied or slept, Clara studied, because she believed that one day words would carry her beyond these walls. Clara had once dreamed of university. At 18, she'd even received an acceptance letter for a linguistics program. But tuition, rent, and her mother's medical bills had crushed that dream before it began. Instead, she tied on a waitress apron and tucked her ambitions into the margins of her notebooks. Night after night, she whispered German verbs to herself as she washed dishes, refusing to let her passion die. And now, for the first time, that hidden dream had slipped into the light. Back in his office, Jonathan Williams couldn't shake the image of Clara translating with ease. He called for his assistant. Find out everything about that waitress, he ordered. Where she comes from, what she studied, why she's hiding in catering. Within hours, a thin file landed on his desk. Jonathan flipped through it, frowning. No degrees, no prestigious background, just a high school diploma, a string of low-paying jobs, and a sick mother. And yet, fluency in German, self-taught. Jonathan sat back, stunned. She's a diamond buried in gravel. Meanwhile, the executives who had watched Clara steal the spotlight gathered privately. She embarrassed us all, one said bitterly. If the boss trusts her, we're finished, another muttered. We can't let that happen. She needs to be shown her place. Plans formed in whispers. A trap, a test, something to expose the waitress as an amateur, because nothing threatened power like unexpected brilliance. Back at the diner, Clara's co-workers teased her endlessly. So you're a celebrity now, huh? One sneered. Going to quit and marry a millionaire? Another laughed. Clara forced a smile. But inside, doubt gnawed at her. She hadn't asked for attention. She only wanted to help. Late that night, staring at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, she whispered to herself, do I really belong in their world? Or was it just luck? Clara's hidden gift had saved a millionaire dinner, but behind the applause lurked envy, suspicion, and schemes designed to break her. As her two worlds collided, poverty at home and power at the banquet table, Clara stood on the edge of a storm that would test her like never before. Because when you shine in places you're not meant to, someone will always try to snuff out your light. After the gala dinner, Clara tried to slip back into her quiet life at the diner. She hoped the attention would fade, that people would forget the waitress who spoke German. But power never forgets, and neither does envy. The executives of Williams Enterprises watched her every move. To them, Clara was a threat. A waitress with no degree had made them look like fools. Worse, Jonathan Williams himself seemed intrigued by her. That alone was enough to spark their resentment into full-blown hostility. "She doesn't belong at the table," one of them sneered. "Then we'll make sure she never sits there again," another replied coldly. Meanwhile, Jonathan Williams couldn't shake Clara from his mind. In his office, he replayed the moment she had spoken flawless German. He had built his empire on recognizing talent, and here was raw brilliance, discovered by accident. But brilliance wasn't enough. He needed to know if it was real, reliable, or just a lucky trick. One afternoon, he summoned Clara to the skyscraper headquarters. She walked nervously into the gleaming lobby, her uniform freshly pressed but still modest. She felt the stares of polished executives as she passed. To them, she didn't belong in marble halls. Jonathan handed her a folder without explanation. "Translate this," he said. Clara opened it. Inside were 3 contracts, one in German, one in French, and one in Italian. Her eyes widened. "I'm fluent in German," she admitted. "French and Italian I can read. But I'm not perfect." "Do your best," Jonathan replied, his gaze sharp. For the next 2 hours, Clara worked diligently. She moved through the German with ease, carefully noted nuances in French, and pieced together the Italian. When she finished, she handed Jonathan her notes, hands trembling. He scanned them silently. His expression gave nothing away, but inside, he was impressed. Not only had she caught subtle phrasing others would have missed, she had flagged a hidden clause in the Italian contract. Jonathan looked up at her. "She's not just good, she's extraordinary." But the executives were not idle. They needed to discredit Clara, and quickly. During preparations for a new deal with Austrian investors, one of them slipped a forged document into the pile. The clauses were twisted deliberately, written in obscure German designed to confuse. If Clara translated incorrectly, she would look incompetent. If she caught it, they would accuse her of overstepping. Either way, she would lose. The night of the meeting arrived. Clara sat quietly behind Jonathan, her notepad in hand. The Austrian investors spoke rapidly in German, their tone brisk and businesslike. Clara translated calmly, her confidence growing. Then the forged document appeared. Clara's eyes scanned it, and her stomach dropped. "This is wrong," she whispered urgently to Jonathan. "This clause, it doesn't belong. It transfers rights away from your company. It's a trick." Jonathan's gaze flicked up sharply. The room tensed. "Are you certain?" he asked. Clara nodded firmly. "Absolutely." Jonathan turned to the Austrians. "Explain this." The investors looked shocked. "We never wrote that," one said quickly. "This is not our document." All eyes turned to the executives. Their faces paled. Jonathan's voice dropped to an icy whisper. "In my office, now. Within hours." The guilty executives were gone. Their offices were emptied, their names erased from company records. Clara had not only saved the deal, she had exposed betrayal at the heart of the company. But victory came at a cost. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that Clara was manipulating Jonathan. Others that she was seeking power she didn't deserve. The gossip columns twisted her into a scandalous headline. Waitress or witch? The girl behind Williams Enterprises. At the diner, customers whispered behind her back. Her manager frowned at the extra attention. Even her co-workers mocked her. Clara began to wonder if saving that dinner had been a mistake. Jonathan, too, wrestled with unease. He sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the city lights. Why do I trust her more than men I've paid millions? Why does her voice echo louder than theirs? He remembered the look in her eyes when she spoke up at the dinner. Not ambition, not greed, but courage. Pure, simple courage. For a man who had spent his life surrounded by opportunists. Clara's sincerity unsettled him. It also intrigued him. Days later, Frau Reinhardt returned for a follow-up meeting. She entered the boardroom with her usual commanding presence, eyes scanning the table. When she saw Clara seated quietly at the side, her stern face softened. "Oh, the girl who speaks," she said warmly in German. Clara blushed. "It's an honor to see you again." Helga turned to Jonathan. "If you are wise, you will keep her close. People like her are rare, not for her words alone, but for her integrity." Jonathan glanced at Clara, and for the first time, allowed himself a small smile. Clara had faced jealousy, sabotage, and whispers of scandal. Yet each test only revealed more of her hidden strength. But the storm was far from over, because soon she would step onto a stage far greater than a dinner table, a stage where billions hung on her words, and one mistake could destroy everything. 2 weeks later, Jonathan Williams received the kind of invitation that could shape the future of his empire. The International Business Alliance Summit, hosted in Vienna. Every influential leader, from finance to energy, would be there. But there was a complication. The keynote negotiations, worth billions, were to be conducted in German. Jonathan's board panicked. "We need a professional interpreter," one insisted. "No," another snapped. "Hire a whole team." But Jonathan only leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting to Clara, who sat quietly taking notes. She looked up, startled. "Me? You want me to?" "Yes," Jonathan said firmly. "I trust you more than anyone else." The board erupted in protest. "She's just a waitress." "This is madness." Jonathan silenced them with a cold glare. "She's the reason Frau Reinhardt stayed. She's the reason we still have Austria. If you have a better suggestion, speak now." No one did. And so, for the first time in her life, Clara boarded a private jet, carrying nothing but her courage, her notebooks, and the weight of the company's future. Vienna sparkled with old-world grandeur. Palaces lit by golden light, cobblestone streets alive with music. But Clara barely noticed. As she walked into the marble hall of the summit, cameras flashed. Journalists whispered, "Isn't that the girl? The waitress? What is she doing here?" Her cheeks burned. She wanted to shrink into the floor, but then she caught Jonathan's eye. He gave the slightest nod. "You belong here." The German delegation entered with regal authority. Their lead negotiator was none other than Frau Reinhardt herself. She swept the hall with her piercing gaze, then paused when she saw Clara. "Ah," she said in German, loud enough for all to hear, the voice of truth. "I am pleased you are here." The room buzzed with curiosity. Who was this young woman who commanded Reinhardt's respect? The negotiations began. Documents thick as dictionaries were exchanged. Reinhardt's team spoke rapidly, layering technical terms and cultural idioms. Clara stood at Jonathan's side, translating word for word with poise. At first, murmurs rippled through the crowd. But as hours passed, those murmurs turned to stunned silence. She wasn't just translating, she was capturing tone, nuance, intent. Even Reinhardt smiled faintly. "She hears the music in words," she whispered to an aide. But enemies had followed Clara here too. Among the summit staff was a rival executive who despised her rise. He bribed a translator to slip a false clause into the German draft. One that would cost Jonathan's company millions. The clause was buried deep, phrased in obscure legal German. To the untrained eye, it looked harmless. When the document reached Clara, she scanned it quickly and froze. Her pulse pounded. She read it again, then again. Her instincts screamed, "It's a trap." But doubt crept in. What if I'm wrong? If I speak up and I'm mistaken, I'll humiliate Jonathan in front of the world. She looked at him. He was watching her closely. "Trust yourself." His eyes seemed to say. Clara took a deep breath. She rose to her feet. "Excuse me," she said firmly, switching to German. "This clause is fraudulent. It grants unilateral control to a party not present here." Gasps exploded across the room. Reinhardt's eyes narrowed. "Show me." Clara pointed. Reinhardt scanned the page, and her face darkened with fury. She slammed the document onto the table. "Who dared bring this here?" she thundered. The rival executive paled. Security dragged him from the hall as whispers rippled like waves. Clara had not only caught the trap, she had saved the summit itself from scandal. Jonathan rose to his feet. His voice rang through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, "you have witnessed something extraordinary tonight. Not from me, not from my company, but from this young woman, Clara Evans." He turned to her, pride in his eyes. She came from a world far from boardrooms and palaces. But her honesty, her brilliance, and her courage have protected all of us tonight. For a moment, the hall was silent. Then applause erupted, thunderous, unstoppable. Delegates rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Clara stood frozen, tears stinging her eyes. She had been invisible her whole life. Now the world was looking at her. After this session, Reinhardt approached her privately. She placed both hands on Clara's shoulders. "Do you know what you are?" she asked in German. Clara shook her head. "A bridge," Reinhardt said softly. "Between worlds, between power and humility." between truth and lies. Never forget that. Clara swallowed hard, overwhelmed. That night, Jonathan met Clara on the balcony of the hotel, city lights glittering below. "You've changed everything," he admitted. "Not just for me, not just for the company. For yourself." Clara shook her head. "I only did what was right." Jonathan smiled faintly. "That's exactly why you belong at the table. Starting tomorrow, you're no longer a waitress. You're my chief cultural liaison. Full salary, full authority, and more importantly, my trust." Clara's breath caught. "You mean?" "Yes," Jonathan said simply. "You've earned it." From a silent corner of a banquet hall to the center of the world's stage, Clara had risen, not by power, not by wealth, but by the courage to speak when others stayed silent. But her journey wasn't over, because while she had gained recognition, the greatest test still awaited her: to balance the life she came from with the life she had now entered. Clara's first act after Vienna wasn't to celebrate with champagne or shop in luxury boutiques. Instead, she boarded a train back to her small town, her new salary contract tucked carefully in her bag. The laundromat smell hit her as soon as she opened the apartment door. Her mother looked up weakly from the sofa, surprised. "Clara, you're home early." Clara knelt beside her, tears in her eyes. "Mama, we're done struggling. I can pay the bills now. I can get you the treatment you need." Her mother touched her cheek gently, pride shining through tired eyes. "I always knew your words would carry you further than you imagined." For the first time in years, Clara felt hope filling the room instead of fear. Within weeks, everything changed. The eviction notices disappeared. Clara's mother received the best medical care. Clara herself walked confidently into boardrooms, no longer carrying trays but carrying influence. Her wardrobe changed. Yes, tailored suits instead of aprons. But so did the way people looked at her. Once invisible, now she was introduced as Miss Evans, our cultural liaison. But despite the power, Clara never forgot where she came from. She still stopped by the diner, leaving generous tips for the waitresses. She still carried her battered notebooks, the margins filled with words in new languages she was eager to learn. Jonathan Williams, too, had changed. Once known for his cold efficiency, he began to listen more, trust more, even smile more. His executives whispered that the waitress had softened him, but in truth, she had sharpened him. He had learned that true strength wasn't in dominance, but in humility, and Clara had taught him that. News outlets ran headlines. From Waitress to Global Voice, the woman who saved the summit. Clara Evans, the interpreter who changed the game. Universities invited her to speak. Non-profits sought her counsel. Young students from poor backgrounds wrote her letters, saying, "You showed us it's possible." Clara answered each one personally, because she knew what it felt like to be unheard. Months later, Clara found herself once again at a dinner. Chandeliers, suits, powerful men and women. But this time, she wasn't carrying trays. She was seated at the table. As delegates debated, a visiting minister switched into rapid Spanish. The room grew tense until Clara leaned forward, translating smoothly. The conversation flowed. Jonathan caught her eye across the table. For the first time, Clara didn't shrink under the weight of the room. She belonged, and as the evening closed, she remembered the night it had all begun, standing with a wine bottle, debating whether to speak. One moment of courage had changed everything. The narrator's voice closes the story. In a room full of silence, one voice spoke. Not the loudest voice, not the richest voice, but the voice of a girl who believed in the power of words. Clara Evans proved that greatness doesn't always arrive with titles or wealth. Sometimes it wears an apron, waits quietly in the corner, and waits for the right moment to be heard. And when it finally speaks, the world listens. So remember, kindness, courage, and knowledge can come from anywhere. Never underestimate the quiet ones, because they just might change the world. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.